This is the Heroic Voice, where I talk to comic book creators, people I've worked with, other interesting people, about the history of comics, superheroes, and the current state of the comic book industry. I also discuss current and upcoming projects, current events, and any other topics my guests might be interested in talking about. So subscribe and hit the like button. Help me grow this channel and promote indie comic book creators, publishers, and other people affiliated with the comic book industry. Your comments are appreciated. Get to it and leave feedback, good, bad, and otherwise. I am your host, Dennis Mallonee, writer, publisher of the Heroic Multiverse, where we spotlight good girls, bad girls, super babes, and superheroics in a classic, kind of golden agey style. Grab some snacks and enjoy. This is the Heroic Voice. So I'm sitting here with Greg Elkins, who does Tiger Paw Press, which is a gaming concern, single proprietorship, as I recall. Yes?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's me.
Greg, you want to say hello to the people who are watching the Heroic Voice here?
Hello.
All right. Greg does Champions role-playing game supplements, for source books and gaming modules. And he has been revisiting some of the old hero games material, the old enemies books, the old campaign modules, and updating them into 6th edition rules. Stuff that's out of print is now available through Tiger Paw Press on, where is it available, Greg?
DriveThruRPG.com and the Hero Games website.
All right. So, Greg, if you would please tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into gaming, what attracted you to the Champions game, in comics. I mean, this is principally a comic
Yeah.
podcast, but we also get into other things, and you're our first guest who is not directly related to the comic book industry.
Hmm.
And this our fourth Heroic Voice podcast on, what is today? Today is June 22nd, 2024.
Yes. I started collecting comics in junior high, and I did that for quite a while. And then right when I graduated high school, a couple friends of mine and myself opened up a small stall at a local flea market, and we were selling comic books. We started ordering game material to sell, and one of the materials that came in was something called Enemies, and we saw it had, it was obviously superheroes or villains that actually, but we started looking at it, and then we wanted to get the game rules because it had interested us to start playing. And so we started with the original box set for Champions. So I guess that kind of dates me there, but and I've been playing it ever since. I fell in love with the system because to me there's nothing I can't do with it. I mean, I've used it for comic books, fantasy, sci-fi, and there's just nothing you can't do with it. It's
The
just that
hero system, the hero system,
Yeah.
there are
And
applications.
we
It
loved
works.
it.
It works pretty well in the middle range, right? When you get to the high end, you can have some problems when you're dealing with low
Yeah.
end. There can be
Yeah.
problems because it doesn't.
Luckily for me, the people I played with, we always played the middle range, so it wasn't a problem for us. But I mean, that's how I got into it. And then, like I said, I've been playing it through every edition except I didn't do the fusion collaboration. I didn't do that. I didn't even know about that one.
That one didn't last very long.
Yeah, but when uh, what's affectionately been known as Fred, the 5th edition rules came out, I started with, got back in with that. And then when the 6th edition rules came out, I noticed they skipped a lot of the people or the villains and such that I loved using. So I worked them up to use against my friends. And then my fiance told me I should start putting, Hero Games came out with their rules for people to use their system with your products. And she encouraged me to start doing that, and that was 2014. So I've been pretty much doing it ever since.
There are practical business reasons for doing that, right? If you
Yeah,
have stuff out there that people are producing that connects to your material, then people are going to go get your material.
yeah. But
So,
they skip so many people that I just love. So I mean, one of them, of course, you changed his name as you know as you progressed, but one of them was like Professor Morte. I used him instead of Doctor Destroyer.
ah,
I liked him better
yeah,
because
Professor Muerte was created by Steve Perrin, the late
yeah,
Steve Perrin, who he was a very dear friend.
yeah, and I know you know he was in your comics for a while,
Yes.
and like I said, I used him because again, Doctor Destroyer struck me as the high end, and we always played more in the middle, so he fit what we were doing much better, and they skipped him, and they didn't skip everybody in that group, but they killed off him, and then there's other villains with Viper they didn't use, and just other villains in general that I always use.
So your goal here was to make those older villains accessible to a new generation of
Yeah,
champions.
and for people that were from you know the original that liked them as well, you know, here they are. Um, I could never figure out why they skipped them. I just liked them too
There
much.
were there were copyright reasons for a lot of that. They simply did not have the rights to use a lot of the characters.
Well, see, I found that out later.
Yes, but that happens. I mean, Marvel published, right, Doc Savage books for a while when they had the rights. They introduced Fu Manchu into the Master of Kung Fu books when they had the rights. And when those rights disappeared, right, they had to figure out what to do.
Well, see, that's actually how I started contacting you. Is there were a couple that Hero Games didn't have the rights to anymore, and they were actually yours. And that's why I originally contacted you. Is they notified me that you know, hey, if you want to do that, you got to talk to these people.
That was kind of them. That was nice. I mean, my relationship with Hero Games has occasionally been strained, right? But I think it's probably okay at the moment. I hope so.
Yeah,
Because I do like the game system. I've been playing it since it came out. There's a group of us that still play it. Do you still play it? Do you have opportunities to do that?
I do. I don't. I only get to play it maybe once or twice a year. Um, Life gets in the way, and life of my players gets in the way. But yeah, I still do it, and I mean, I sit down all the time and just create people, just to create people, you know.
Yeah,
And then I end up using them for some of my products. A lot of my uh, the people in my products are actually old heroes and villains that I used way back in the day.
let's
I
talk about let's talk about the products,
well,
right?
I have a
What's
series
actually
called
available out there now that people could get off of Drive-Through RPG?
yeah, I have one series called it's called SID Report, SID being SID, which stands for Superior Individual Report or Database Report. And a lot of them were the villains that I used against people, you know, 20 years ago. But I updated the new system and put them out. And I mean, there's one group. I was wanting to tell you this because I thought you'd get kicked out. This one group that um, basically is your fault in a way. Uh, there was a group I played with a long time ago, and they had a place you could go just to play. And believe it or not, it was above a mortuary,
Oh my.
and it had the steepest stairs you ever seen in your life. But we'd go up there and play, and some of the guys that would come into play, the people I always play with, we always use disadvantages to fill out your character. You know, kind of give people more of a background. The original system, the more disadvantages you had, the more points you got to spend. And that's pretty much how these people approached it. They would take stupid disadvantage or disadvantages they figured wouldn't get in their way. And one of the disadvantages they would take would not fight or harm a woman. Which I mean, there's nothing wrong with that disadvantage, really. That's how my dad raised me, and I raised my son. So there's nothing wrong with it in general. But I heard one of the guys talking to a new player, he told him it was free points because most villains are men. And if women show up, let the players who weren't smart enough to take that disadvantage deal with them. So I went home and I was going to GM the next week, and I was wanting to come up with a good idea. And Adventure Club number 7 came out. And in Adventure Club number 7 was a thing called the guilt complex that you wrote. And I was reading it, and I mean it had to do with that, but it didn't because it was talking about something else. But just reading it instantly in my mind, it popped up. What would happen if they showed up and there was nothing but women? So I worked up a group at that time that was called Women, and I of course gave it the stupid, you know, what it stands for, which what was it? Women Organizing Men's Elimination or Neutralization. That was it. It has now morphed into the sisterhood, which I like so much better. But so I used, your kind of concept, and I created a group that was nothing but women. So we went up there, and when they showed up, they stopped to rob a bank, and there was nothing but women. And some of them looked at me like I was out of my mind. My players just started, doing what you do to stop them. One of the players with that disadvantage came up with the idea of just standing in the doorway and resisting them leaving because technically that's not fighting. And I couldn't fault him on that. But so that's how this group came out, and it's one of the groups in the SID report. And there's like I think 8 or 9 members of that group now. And after we did that, my players loved that group. They kept wanting me to play that group more than anything else. And I never could figure out why until I sit down and talk to one of my players, and he pointed out that if you think about it, in this day and age, if Batman, Captain America, whatever really existed, if they go running into the bank and first thing Batman does is start slapping Harley Quinn around, he's going to get wrote up bad in the newspaper.
Oh yeah.
So finding that group made them think of ways to stop them without necessarily just unloading on them. And that's why they love that group. So I started working up other groups that made them think like that too. And for us, that's what we like. For other players, they showed up, found out I was going to be running, and they just turn around and walk off. They didn't even deal with it, which I thought was funny.
It's challenging the players
Yeah.
in various different ways.
Yeah,
But
because
that's a good game master thing to do. You don't want to just give them something and have them walk through it,
yeah, just show up, beat on the guy, go home. That's boring.
Yeah.
Make them think some. And really in comics, that's kind of what the death trap, if you will, is all about, is making Batman figure a way to get out of this trap before it kills him, not necessarily just blowing things up.
Mhm.
And it works out great for fights too. So I did stuff like that. The 40-foot purple dinosaur kind of upset a few people, but I thought it was funny. So how can you fight this when the kid watching is crying because you're beating up on the dinosaur? So they had to figure a way to get around that, but they didn't enjoy that one very much.
So talk to me then. You're talking about game mastering. Talk about it from the player standpoint. I assume you've been a player in other people.
Oh yeah.
What is it that you particularly like about playing in the superhero role-playing game genre?
Well, I collected comic books, so I fell in love with superheroes, and so I was instantly attracted. Champions was the first superhero game I ever saw. Now, back then, there was a couple others. There's Villains and Vigilantes. I remember that one.
You ever play Superhero 2044?
Yeah, I saw that was the other one. But I actually saw Champions first. So, yeah, I just fell in love with the concept because I love comic books. And all my friends that we played with collected comic books. So it just seemed a natural progression. I mean, we played the fantasy, and we even played D&D at the time, but that was just more a thing to do when you got together. We didn't really get into that like we got into Champions, just because we collected comics. We loved the genre, we loved the concept, and this game for us just flowed so well and just made so much sense to us.
Let you play or act out, things that you might have wanted to see in the comic books books or
Yeah, and even some of the characters. I mean, you play you collect Spider-Man, and then you find a superhero game. You're going to make a Spider-Man clone. It's just that simple. There's no way around it. That's just what you do. But we had ideas for heroes and villains at the time that weren't in the comic books, and
Mhm.
that's where some of these other characters that came along the way. And for us, we'd sit here talking about different characters, and then here was a game that you could create exactly what you've been thinking and talking about. It was just a natural for us.
Do you by any chance remember what your first comic book was, the first one you read?
Spider-Man.
An issue of Spider-Man?
Yeah, it was the one. Now it'd be worth so much money. It was the one with Punisher. The cover, you see Spider-Man. I can't remember the number. There's yellow.
122?
The Brooklyn Bridge is in the back. Nightcrawler's in the series.
Okay,
But
that's not
that,
that's not the
yeah, that
first
was one of the
edition.
first ones I ever honed.
Ah, okay. So that would be the mid 70s.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's when I was in high school. So.
Yeah. The favorite books. You obviously liked Spider-Man. What other comics appealed to you at that
I
time?
collected X-Men, Iron Fist, and Shang-Chi. Those were the ones I did most. My first true series was Marvel Team Up with Spider-Man and other people,
Uh-huh.
and
And did
that
it
also
serve the
introduced me to
purpose? Did it serve the purpose it was
some
intended?
of the other heroes.
Intro, then it did serve the purpose it was intended to serve.
Yeah,
Introducing you to other characters in the Marvel universe.
yeah, and that's where I first found out about Iron Fist and started collecting him. And there's others along the way.
That would have been a John Byrne issue, wouldn't it, as I
Yeah,
remember? And that was right toward the end of the Iron Fist run. So you would have had to go back and get those
yeah, I
copies.
had to go back and pick up back issues, but that was all right. I was already doing that with Spider-Man, so it was kind of funny. My parents had a friend that lived like 2 blocks from um, the flea market. So they'd go to see their friends on the weekends, and I'd walk over to the flea market to get comic books.
Hmm. How much did they cost you those days at the flea market?
35 cents.
And the cover
35 cents was the cover price.
uh
Yeah, now some of because I was behind, I was paying, $4 or $5 for a comic, maybe less. And then, of course, the longer it went, the more expensive they got.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But see, by the time we had the stall, we were actually selling the comics we were selling. There was a dealer here in town that we had bought comics from that he sold as comics to resell. And then we were also including some of our collection that we were thinning out or getting tired of or whatever as well. So, and then, like I said, then we start selling gaming stuff.
Do you still read comics?
I still read them from time to time. I don't collect them at all anymore.
Why would that be? Why would you stop collecting? Aside from the price, is there any reason that you don't collect anymore?
Well, I collected up to the time I got married, and then I got in. I was concentrating on the marriage and my family, and just kind of drifted away and never went really back. I still look every now and then, and now that it's digital, I'll pick things up every now and then.
So you have been reading comics occasionally these
Yeah.
days.
Oh yeah.
So let me pose a
Seeing the
question to
movies.
you. Do you have a sense of what's different now in the comic book industry as far as the writing, the artist, versus what it was back when you first started reading it when you were a kid, right? You didn't really much have a sense of what comics might be, right? You saw what they were. And you've had all that time now to watch the progression. What would you say is maybe the biggest difference between comics then and comics now, aside from the price?
I think I believe it was called the Comic Code because I've noticed um, a lot of comics are getting more adult themed, and the fights, yeah, back then they'd knock them into walls or whatever, but the fights, I don't know if violent is the right word, but you see seriously injuring a lot more in the comics now. You see killing more often than you did back then. There was a Spider-Man Wolverine team up where somebody snuck up on Spider-Man, punched or tapped his shoulder and he turned around and punched him hard enough to kill him. That was a late 80s series. That wouldn't have been done in the 70s.
No, that would not have been done.
And there's other some of the the comics now you can look at and go, they wouldn't have allowed that in the 80s.
Uh-huh.
But and some of the themes, and also the back in the 70s, I mean, they'd have multiple issue storylines, but it was only one or maybe two, or two and maybe three issues, and that's it. And then they move on to something else. Now I've noticed that the main story may only last a couple of issues, but there's always a sub story somewhere, and sometimes they last, 5, 10 issues.
That's not new. Stan Lee was doing that with the Marvel books.
Yeah, but he didn't do that till about the 80s. In the 70s,
No, he was doing it in the 60s. I mean,
oh, I never really noticed that. But so I'm not. The other thing that I got to admit, in some ways, when I was collecting, bothered me was like when they came out with Secret Wars. Okay, it was a miniseries, had no problem. But then they tie it into every other comic they sold. So if you wanted to keep track, you had to buy all these, and that's fine one off. But then you notice the next big storyline they did it again, and then they get. So as a collector, you kind of get tired of that because
that's referred to in the industry as Red Sky stories.
Is that what it is?
You know where that comes from?
Mm.
That was Crisis on Infinite Earths, right? Where there were books that had nothing to do with the crisis, but oh, the sky is red, right? So this is totally a crisis tie-in.
Yeah, you gotta have it.
Nothing in the book has anything to do with it.
But so I mean, as a collector, it bothered me. But you could also understand at the same time because all these people were getting involved, but it still kind of bothered you a little bit. But and again, that was like Secret Wars was toward the end of the 80s, mid 80s.
Yeah, it was Jim Shooter's big baby. He wondered why they'd never really done a company-wide crossover story. So he thought he'd do one and boost sales without actually understanding that there's a decreasing value for doing that. You do it once, it's interesting. You do it again, it's less interesting. And if you keep doing it, nobody cares anymore.
I'm not sure which was first, Secret Wars or Crisis.
Crisis was first.
Okay.
Right. And that was Marvin Len's idea of cleaning up all of the jumbled continuity on the theory that everything should be connected, which, to my mind is a bogus theory to begin with. There are things that should not be connected. And I actually argued with Roy Thomas about this when he wanted to bring Dracula into the mainstream Marvel universe, right? When he wanted to bring the Eternals into the mainstream Marvel universe, I tried to explain to him that creative worlds are defined not only by what they include, but by what they don't include, right? And if you put everything into the Marvel universe, you don't have a coherent creation anymore.
Yeah.
But Roy
understand that.
Roy had his own ideas, and Roy's, a very good writer. So, I made my point and he rejected it.
To me, I think the one thing the Marvel universe is making a mistake on is they have too many Earths. You read a story only to find out that it's not, the story or the Earth with the Spider-Man, but then you read another story and it's not that Earth or the Spider-Man, it's, and they just kept adding and adding it. I think they I can understand, they're like, if you have multiple Earths, you can do more like what if stories without calling it what if. But when you have that many Earths, it just confuses everybody.
Another argument that I had with Roy, but
yeah, I think they went.
I think I'll save that for the Roy Thomas
for another time. Okay.
No, I'm going to save it for when I actually sit down and talk to Roy on one of these heroic voices things. I'll say, Roy, I warned you.
I'd like to see what he says about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. But no, that's how I got into comics, and that's how I actually got into Champions itself.
The game.
Yeah, the game.
Because you were reading comic books, and now we're going to get back into the role-playing games. And what was your favorite in the early days of Champions? Did you have a favorite module? You mentioned enemies, that was your first one, but was there one in particular that you liked Obviously, you also read the Adventurers Club
Yes. Yeah,
magazine.
I had
It's got
all
a lot of
those
interesting
designs.
stuff in there.
Yes, and a lot of useful stuff.
Mhm.
Because like the original, what came out in Champions 2, where they gave you new area effects and all that, was actually in Venture Club first. So we were already using it. So, when the rules came out, it like became official, for everybody else. But yeah, there's so much. I did like the Island of Dr. Destroyer, the original, because at that time, in the original uh, setup for champions, like B1, 2, 3, he
Hold on
wasn't
just
so.
a second, because there are people who don't know this. The Island of Dr. Destroyer was included in the original box champion.
Yes, and
So
at that
everybody who
time,
bought champions had that.
yes, everybody. And at that time, he wasn't so top end. He was kind of where everybody else was. But then,
An evil Iron Man kind of.
yeah, exactly. He was an evil Iron Man clone. But as they kept updating the system, he kept getting more and more and more and more powerful. And that's kind of when, like I said, I went away from him. Mechanon's the same way. The concept is great. The original setup, he could still take on multiple heroes, but then as the new systems came out, he became, you got to have a team or two to take on this guy. And that's kind of when I moved away from him too.
So power creeping happens in role-playing
Yeah.
games as well as in comic books.
Yeah. And we'll see this. And another argument I've had with people, to build a character in 6th edition Champions, that character is going to be more expensive than 4th edition or 3rd edition, but not necessarily power level more powerful, just higher points because the point system changed and went around. And like now, you know, even 5th edition had figured characteristics. 6th edition doesn't have that. So instantly everything becomes more expensive because now your DCV and OCV, offensive combat value and defensive combat value, was based on your decks for 5th edition back. But for 6th edition, it's totally separate. You
Mhm.
have the base and then you pay points to go up. So automatically you're increasing the cost of building the character.
Yeah.
So that was something that I noticed, it's just more expensive to build somebody now.
Do you prefer 6th edition or 5th edition? Just as a point of curiosity.
To me, they're equal. I mean, the only big difference I see is the point cost.
Mhm.
The character you build the same way.
Do champions rules still allow you to construct a character that would come out of the comic books well?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. You sometimes have to think about it.
Hmm.
And that was one thing that I didn't get really good until 5th edition came out. And that was because you were reading what Steve Long, who was the main contributor at the time, was doing, and then when you understood what he did, all these other things just started making sense. And the perfect example was a bag of holding from fantasy. How do you do a bag of holding? How do we always kind of struggled with that. And then he worked it up as extra-dimensional movement.
Aha, that
And then
worked.
you realize you think out of the box, and then all this other stuff, it's like Thor's hammer. How do you work up the damage for throwing a hammer? Well, you realize it's just an energy blast, and the special effect is the hammer goes and comes back.
Yeah, yeah,
But you got
that was an
if you
easy
don't,
solution.
yeah. But if you don't think outside of the box, because you're sitting there going, how do you do a hammer, and how we got to give it flight to
What are the
come
game
back to
mechanics?
him.
What are the game mechanics? Don't think about
Yeah,
the object. Think about the
it's
game
like
mechanics you want to do.
if we don't give it flight, the hammer don't come back. Or if you don't give it the hammer teleport, but well, if you make an energy blast, you don't have to mess with all that.
Right. Let's talk. We've talked about past. We talked about present. Let's talk about future. Right.
Okay.
And you may notice behind me.
Yes,
Yes.
I love that.
Okay. That
That is a
is
great cover.
a joint production of Heroic Publishing and Tiger Paw Press that's coming up. Tell us about it.
Well, this all started because I guess it's a little over a year ago. I originally contacted you to bring the original champions to 6th edition, and I did, and it sold well. And then we started talking, and we wanted to update them, but we also realized that there was so much of the champions I didn't know about. There's characters in this supplement for champions I didn't even know were part of the part that I didn't know they existed, and I didn't know they were part of the champions. And the background was able to be fleshed out much more than I was aware of to let people know the actual origin of them.
The League of Champions source book, that is the cover illustration
Yes.
for it, is based on the Heroic Publishing comic books, right? We're giving characters like the Huntsman, Ice Star, the G-Girl, Black Enchantress, and Flare the histories, the personalities, the powers, the characterizations, the story ideas, all derived from the comic books, right? So automatically, as you say, we're getting a lot more information.
And a lot more characters. And
A
that's
lot
a
more
big
characters.
well
In
see
addition to these five, right? These are the currently active members of the
right.
champions. We also have the reserve members. Psyche, the Tigress,
Congress.
Nightwind, Sparkplug, and Icicle are
Yes.
also in this source book. All the details, all the powers, all of the skills, all of the weaknesses.
All their backgrounds. And see, a perfect example of what I meant when I did the original, I had no idea who G Girl was until you said something to me. I had no idea about her.
Well,
You
people will have to buy this in order to find
yeah,
out.
well, and then for this edition, I knew you had a character called Tigress, had no idea that she had any involvement with the champions, and I had didn't know about Nightwind. So that's things I've learned from just doing this.
Mhm.
Making this supplement that I didn't know about. And I'm sure when we do the follow-up supplement with the inactive members and reserve members, I want to find out things about them that I had no idea about
But
either.
the next project that
Yeah.
we're going to do together is the League of Enemies.
Yeah, that's the one I'm looking forward to. As a GM, I use villains so much more than heroes, so I'm looking forward to getting more bad guys into the mix.
Okay,
And
and what else? What else do we have on here? All of this will be available through Drive-Thru RPG, right? There will
right,
be physical copies that you can get from there. I'm also going to be doing a special limited edition, probably autographed, that'll be available at some point, although not yet. But
yeah.
we're also going to do a follow-up League of Champions volume, which is going to be like the headquarters, the associate members.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, and I haven't run this by you before, but you also put in Flair's household staff, right? All the people who work for the champions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the headquarters design.
We're talking about doing a supplement for Uber Machine and good old Professor Pomegranate. I know what
the whole pomegranate family.
Yeah, the whole thing, which goes back to Adventure Club number 7, because the three in there were actually from that. So it's all getting connected here. And then, we're also talking about doing the Witch Girl Detective Agency.
Right. Witch Girls Incorporated, a detective agency run by witches.
So, we got a lot of things in the mix. And, to me, if people, for the people that read your comic, they're going to know about all this stuff.
No, there's actually stuff in this supplement that we know about that has never been in the comic books.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
There are whole storylines that have been referenced in the comic books that have never actually appeared. And in this supplement, you're going to get a chance to find out some of the details of those.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like there's going to be enemies that they've heard of or whatever that they're going to find out more information about. And then there's the players that come from the champion side that's going to learn about all these people that they may never even heard of. And then I know, writing the supplement, there's a couple of villains I want to twist your arm on real hard to be able to bring out too. So to me, it's a blessing for the people that play the game, because they're going to learn all this information they may not know. And then also for the people who read the comics, because they're going to find out more, and they may be introduced into a game that they haven't played before that they could start playing and really enjoy and use these characters in.
Cross-pollination, it's great. You get the
Yeah.
multimedia stuff, get people interested from all sides of this in the characters. The characters are the important thing, I think, right?
Well, I mean, reading the storylines, when I was getting everything set up, it's like some of them I didn't know anything about, and they're just entertaining and interesting, especially when you look at the way it's come out. I mean, the way Huntsman started and the way he is now, and you read the whole story, how he got to that point, it's really interesting to read. All of them are.
Of all of these 10, do you have a favorite among them?
Probably Nightwing, and mostly because I didn't know about him till I did this.
Let's give credit where credit is due. I mean, Nightwing is not a character I created. He was created by a very dear friend of mine, Andrew M. Robinson, right? And Andy had this idea for a superhero who pretended to be a ghost, who wasn't really, which I thought was a wonderful idea because I don't remember actually seeing that in the comics. It may have been there, someone pretending to be a ghost who wasn't, right? But
Well, see,
I don't remember seeing a character
no,
like
I can't think of anyone pretending to be a ghost. Now, there's a few that people thought were ghosts, but that was more their concept of them than him thinking he's a ghost.
Mhm.
So that's the big difference. I think that there's a lot of art in this supplement, and some of them turned out wonderful. I think my favorite one is of Psyche.
Oh yeah, that's the piece that Paul Abrams did, where she's wearing the trench coat over her red outfit.
She's got the hat. I love the hat. And some of the other, I mean, all the art in here is really good. And for people that come from like Marvel or DC, this may be artists they've never seen before.
I hope so. I hope it gets people interested in it.
And I,
Just as an
you know, I
aside,
mean,
the visuals for Psyche were based on Stephanie Zimbalist in the old Remington Steele TV show.
oh, okay.
That was, the squarish sort of jaw, the hat, right?
Yeah.
The detective suit.
And I mean, I'm not saying this because it's our supplement, but I mean, looking through there, there's no art in there that isn't good. It's all so neat.
Wonderful artists for this one.
Yeah. Now there's a couple I'd seen before or similar to something I'd seen before, but all of it's new and
No, actually, I'm going to correct you on that. It's
new
not
to me.
new to you.
New to me.
And all of this, what I did was I picked what I thought were the best illustrations of the characters that we had on file in here, and I took those out. Right, Mark Beecham's G-Girl drawing, right, Henry Martinez's Sparkplug, just the ones